What's up, guys? I'm back with a new video on your light metering. Very important to understand your different types of light metering, because if you don't, it will take you longer to get the correct exposure, right? So I hope you guys remember my manual exposure metering, where I talked about your built-in light meter in your camera. Okay, so there are two types of light meters. You have your incident light meter, which calculates the light that is falling on your subject. So if there's a light falling on the subject, the incident meter will basically calculate that light that's falling. Okay, then you have your reflective meter, and reflective meter will calculate the light that is bouncing off of your subject. Okay, so most DSLRs, they use your reflective metering. Okay, so they calculate the light that is bouncing off of. Okay, so if I were to quickly focus on this, I'm getting 1/800th of a second. Okay, and if I were to focus on the bottom, I'm getting 1/25th of a second. And if I focus on the black thing, I'm getting 1/80th of a second. So the camera is basically calculating the light that is bouncing off of these things. Why are you getting 1/800th of a second here versus 1/80th here? Much brighter, a lot more light. So camera is increasing the shutter speed to prevent a lot of light coming into the lens. So the camera doesn't want overexposure. Okay, I don't know if that's right or wrong. Most likely it's wrong, because that's how the camera gets tricked. Anyway, so there are three different types of light metering options that you could use in your DSLR. Okay, number one is your matrix metering. Okay, and if you use Canon, it's not called matrix. In Canon, it's called evaluative metering. For Nikon, it's called matrix. So if I say matrix in this video a lot, that just means because I'm so used to saying matrix because I own Nikon. Just, if you're a Canon user, just know that I'm talking about evaluative metering. So you have your matrix metering, you have your center weight metering, and you have your spot metering. You guys need to understand when to use these different types of metering and how they calculate the light. All right. So matrix metering, basically what it does is that this is your frame. Okay, it divides your frame into smaller different frames. Okay, here, like rectangular boxes. Okay, split this, whatever, and it will calculate and it will give you an average of all this. Okay, so if you have like a tricky lighting situation, do not use matrix metering system, and I'll tell you why. If you have a subject standing right here, and you have a lot of light here, or you have a lot of light in the background or whatever, what the matrix light metering is doing is that it's calculating all the light and it's going to give you an average. So your subject is on this side, but it's basically calculating all the light from this side as well, where you could have a lot of light or you could have no light. So that's how your meter is going to get tricked. So don't use matrix lighting system especially if you're doing portraits. Try to avoid it. I'll tell you when you can get away with matrix light metering if you're doing portraits. If you're doing landscape, things like that, where you want to get the average of what's in the frame, matrix. I don't know why I said matrix. Matrix metering. If you're doing landscape, because you want to get a nice metering across the board. Correct exposure. Okay. Then you have another metering which is called center weight. Center weight will basically give you metering from the center of your frame. If you look in your viewfinder, you'll see an area like a round kind of like a whole thing, and I believe it's about 14%, 15% of your frame. So center weighted I don't recall ever using center weighted. Center weighted is really common in your point and shoot cameras, and the reason why manufacturers use center weighted as your default is because most people don't know about the rule of thirds. So what they do is that they take the subject and they just put it right in the middle, and that's where the center weighted, helps you if you're doing point and shoot, because center weighted will calculate the light that is in the middle, and if your subject is in the middle, then you will get the right exposure metering. You know what I mean? So, well, DSLR, obviously, you have more options. So, I don't recall ever using center weight, to be honest. So, I'm not saying it's bad. I just never used it. I am normally between spot metering and matrix, all depending on what I'm photographing. Okay. Now, spot metering basically calculates the light where you focus. This square focal point, like I've been talking about this for a long time, how you have to place this focal point on the eye when you're doing portraits. Well, this is going to calculate the light in this area. It's about 7% of your frame. Okay, so it's not just the eye that is going to, the light that's falling off of the eye, it's not just going to calculate that little spot there, it's about 7% of your frame. So spot metering is basically used when you're doing portraits. Is that the only thing you should use? Do it for the most part. Unless, when you get the hang of it, when you have so many shots under your belt, you will realize, you'll just automatically know when you look at a situation, and you'll know right away if it's okay to use matrix here or not. Okay, but if you're doing portraits, stick with your spot metering. Okay, and the reason why I'm telling you, because there are other formulas I'm going to tell you in future. Depending on who you're photographing, you may have to over and underexpose. If you're photographing my wife, who's fair skin and everything, the exposure on her is going to be different than mine, because I'm not as fair as she is, or someone who's darker than me. Exposure it's going to be different. So that's why I'll explain that in the future, when to over and underexpose deliberately. Okay. All right. So I quickly want to show you guys where to go to change this different type of metering. All right. So right now my metering is set on matrix. This is what the sign is for matrix. Now I honestly don't know if it's the same sign for evaluative metering in your Canon or not. You'll have to basically read the manual. Just look under the metering option. Alright, so D7000, and I am going to assume that on most Nikon cameras it's going to be the same way. So here's your metering button. Press this and the back dial. So right now it's matrix. Change this, and this is spot metering right now. One spot. And it's getting blurrier, and this is your center weight. Sorry. There you go. This is your center weight. So matrix, giving you the average of the frame. Spot, just that one spot, it's about 7%, and your center weight. Okay? And if you can't do it from here, most likely you'll have to go in your menu to do this. I also want to quickly show you some sample pictures, and I'll show you the close-up later. So 3 samples, look at the exposure, it's going to be different. 2, 3. Okay. Here you could see this was shot on matrix. Jeez. Matrix, look at the exposure here, 320. This was shot on spot metering. Look at the exposure, it's different. This was center weight. Different. Alright, so let's take a look at these pictures. Alright, so here's the first picture. This was shot on matrix. Let me look at the properties. 1/320th of a second. Alright, this exposure looks good to me. Okay, so the camera basically calculated the light in the whole frame, and it gives you an average. It divides the frame into smaller frames, and it gives you the average. So in a situation like this, the lighting is not too complicated. It's not actually complicated at all. Um, so matrix metering, I thought looked gave me better exposure than all the other metering. So here's your matrix at 1/320th of a second. Then I switched the light meter to spot metering. Spot metering, you can look clearly it's overexposed, and I'll explain why this is overexposed. So when I switched to spot metering, the reading changed from 320 to 1/60th of a second. Why is it 1/60th? Because I focused on this black thing. So camera looked at this black thing and thought, okay, this is too dark. Let me slow the shutter speed down. And when the shutter speed slows down, more light enters the lens. And that's why spot metering in this situation did not work. If this happens to you, please don't panic and say, oh my god, I should have used matrix metering or evaluative. All you have to do is simply drop just increase your shutter speed. So if this is 1/60th of a second, just increase it and see what kind of exposure you get in your next shot. So the advantage of using or understanding what's the correct metering, it basically just saves you time. So if you can get this shot correctly the first time, if you are doing matrix or whatever metering you're using, depending on what you're photographing, then it saves you time. But it doesn't mean that you have to go and switch the metering. If you're doing portraits, just do spot metering and you're going to be fine. And even in spot metering, you're going to have issues when when the light meter gets tricked. You will always have sometimes where it's just not doing the right metering. And in that case, as a photographer, you have to think logically and improvise, and you change your shutter speed. Alright, so third picture, this was center weighted. And this to me it's not too bad, but it's slightly underexposed. So I don't ever recall using center weighted. This pretty much picked up the light from the center part, which is the gold area and a little bit of the wall. So try to use spot metering when you're doing portraits, landscape. Do use your matrix or evaluative, and I even use sometimes matrix when the lighting is not too tricky. If it's just a normal cloudy day, I use my matrix, and if I see that I'm having some trouble, I make the adjustment, and that's all there's to it. Alright, so I hope this video helps you, and until next time, you guys keep clicking.